Hey guys, welcome to another week of Power Rankings with the Ice Hockey Aussies. It's week 13, and here to get us started is myself with P32. I've got a new bottom of the table team now. They just had an absolute shocker this week. It's the Anaheim Ducks.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was interested to see if you actually ended up doing it. I've done the same thing and gone with Anaheim Ducks as 32, dropping two
I just
positions.
couldn't I just couldn't go away from that week. It was disgusting. I don't think I've watched three worse hockey games, to be honest.
Well, there's no effort. Like, I understand if you get blown out, you get blown out, but there was no effort, I think, in any of the
Mm.
games. And it reminds me of Columbus at the start of the season when they had zero effort playing their games. So, yeah, very worrying signs, honestly. Maybe they're purposely throwing. I don't know, but it was very worrying.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's just that's how bad they are, or yeah, they've decided that they're going to tank. Because honestly, it just looked like all three games. Like I get that the Devils have a very quick side. Edmonton have a very powerful forward, and so do Boston. I get that, I really do. But they were just walking through the Ducks' defense. Like the amount of sort of breakaway one-on-ones. No wonder Gibson's given up 19 goals in 3 games when his defense is nowhere to be seen. Like,
Yeah.
yep, he probably should be saving a few more. But honestly, with the way that defense was, I wouldn't have been surprised if they lost them all by 10 goals. That's how bad they were, and it's just, yeah, it was hard to watch.
Yeah, I think it was probably one of the worst periods of a team of this season, honestly, from
Hmm.
what I was seeing. And that's
Yep.
that's a big statement when you have things like Chicago and Columbus the way they've played this season as well. But
Big
already,
time. I don't think I've seen Chicago play worse than I saw the Ducks play this week,
yeah,
and that is saying something.
yeah, it's a big statement.
Hmm.
Onto that team, I've got Chicago at 31. So just moving up one
Ooh.
position, just leapfrogging Anaheim.
I've given them a couple of positions. Um,
Yeah,
I just felt like a bit of reward for their 3 game win streak. Um, Columbus weren't doing too much until today, so yeah.
yeah. Well, they beat Calgary in OT, Colorado 3-2, and then they go and lose to the Kraken 5-8. I don't know what to make of that game because Kraken seems to have that game every now and then. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like
Six goals in
yeah,
5 goals in 6 shots or whatever it was. Yeah, I almost put them back at 31 because of that,
yeah,
but they pulled it back a little bit. Like I kind of just left them at 30,
yeah.
but
It makes sense. I understand the team that you've had leapfrog, and I get it
mhm.
completely. But I guess we'll just move on to that one then.
Yeah, well, yeah, no point pushing down. At 31, it's not going any better for this team as we thought it might. At some point, but Columbus Blue Jackets,
Yeah,
they
pretty.
just continue to not play well. And I get it. They've got the injuries and all the rest of that. And I think they've just pretty much accepted that this year is good night dick, basically. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of expected more from this team.
Oh, when you
I
get a
don't know why.
Goudreau and you have a Line A on your team, that's why. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the Edmonton in that sense. Like at least you have a first line, but they're just lacking centers. Said it all season, and it'll be said all until they actually get someone to fill the 1 and 2 spot. Um, and,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't even know a coach can do much with that team without centers.
And I think, they're missing Wierenski pretty badly. I don't think he turns their entire season around, but the fact that they're not going to have him at all this year is extremely damaging to their blue line. And when you've got goaltenders like Merzlikins and Korpisalo who can't save a puck to save their life, it makes it even harder.
Yeah,
So
and I honestly
yeah.
I don't think Merzlikins wants to be there anymore either with all the treatment he's had. So it just like you got very low morale as well on your players. So not only you're losing bad, but then you got low morale. Alrighty, on to pick number 29. Team moving down one spot, it's the Arizona Coyotes.
I, I figured we always knew that this was the way they were going to end up, but yeah, it looks like the dream of that nice little run that they had, and being ultra competitive is slowly fading away.
Yeah, well, like to a point, like sure they go 0-4 this week. But I feel like they competed in all their games. Like they lose 4-1 to Pittsburgh, but concede empty net. 4-2 to San Jose. That's the kind of one I would like to see them win. Um, 5-3 to Ottawa, then 2-1 to Minnesota. So and they're not really getting outplayed too heavily, I don't think. But it's kind of what we said with some teams like Ottawa and stuff. They're just not getting results at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess that's the positives you take from this, right? As an Arizona supporter, you'd be like, "Yep, okay, we've lost 8 straight, not great, but we're in basically every game we play. We're never out of it,
Mm,
but we're losing, which is also good because we're tanking for Bedard. So, like,
yeah,
I yeah, I feel like I don't know, they might turn it back around and just get a few of those other gutsy wins that we had been seeing the few weeks prior. But yeah, it's amazing to think the team that last month beat Boston, Toronto, Colorado, LA Kings, um, yeah, just lost 8 in a row.
yeah.
But hey,
It's what they want, like what the management want. It's not what the players want. But it'll be interesting how good or bad they get after if they do sell Chikrin. How much worse or even better. Sometimes teams get better
I,
out of random
well, I tell
things.
you what, I'd rather go after Jacob Chikrin than go after Eric Carlson for what the Sharks have asked for him. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, man.
and
The league
it
and teams hype on just defensemen getting points and not actually defending is beyond ridiculous. And I don't know
is.
how
It
you can
is.
ask that with that cap hit.
Well, do you know what? At the next pick at 28, let's talk about his team,
Yep.
the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, that's where I've got San Jose as well. Jumping Arizona.
Yeah, I think that was probably the highlight of their week. To be honest, they got absolutely destroyed by Edmonton yesterday. They got a win against Arizona, but other than that, it's things are pretty much going the way it's expected in San Jose. Eric Carlson's scoring points, and San Jose are losing. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't I don't know how much better it's going to get because I don't think they're going to trade Eric Carlson if they really want three
well,
first round picks and
yeah. Well,
only 18% retained.
my big worry for that is what is their asking price for Timo Meyer? Um, if that's your asking price for Eric Carlson, I think
Mhm.
like I don't even know if they could get rid of Timo Meyer. Um, Timo Meyer. Yeah, with that asking price, it's honestly going to be pretty insane. And honestly, it'd
Well,
probably only be like a team like Boston who just go all out for this one season that could maybe pick him up if they had cap space. But that's about it. All I can see.
look, I feel like Myers probably a bit more obtainable than Carlson, but
Oh yeah, but
that's only because of the cap hit.
yeah, but I'm just
The
saying their
question
asking
is what does San
price.
Jose want?
Yeah, I reckon
Which
there's.
I don't get because if Timo Meyer goes, do you know what? I'm gonna only take the 1 year contract. I think it's like a 10 mil um uh, RFA sort of status that if he claims it,
Mm,
it's 10 mil for a year,
yep,
and then he walks as a UFA. So these guys, and same with Carlson, every year he becomes less and less valuable.
yep,
Retain 50% of the salary, get as much as you can for him, and piss him off because you're not going to be any good for the next 4 years. So
yeah,
you can eat that cap for 4 years; it'll be fine. But
I agree.
anyway,
A lot to do for that team. On to
yeah, for
another
sure.
team. Moving down two positions for me, I've got the Vancouver Canucks. Um, just not liking what they've done this week. I feel like I
Well,
had
I
to.
didn't.
I feel like I had to push them.
Yeah.
They lost four. They got, you concede 7 goals against the Jets. They concede five against Pittsburgh, concede five against Tampa, and then concede four against Florida. Florida. Oh my God, I cannot speak. Um, that it's like there's no defense and goaltending or anything going on there. Um,
Yeah.
you can't concede that many goals. It's just period. Just plain hockey, stats, numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely understand that move. I don't think I saw enough from the team I've got below them to sort of put that past. But yeah, it's definitely not looking good for Vancouver. I think there was a period there where a few people, including myself, thought, oh, maybe they might make something of their season here. Um, and then it's just completely crashed. And yeah, I,
Yeah,
I think it's panic time for Canucks fans.
yeah. It's I'm really interested to see what the management do with their trades. Uh, because honestly, that core is not working. There's something very fundamentally wrong. Even for how good it looks on paper, and yeah, if it's not handled well, they could be in something like a San Jose position. Honestly, if it's not handled correctly. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
I'm definitely panicking if I was a Vancouver fan.
yeah, for sure. They've got to do something. They have younger talent than San Jose, I
Oh
think,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it could still get just as bad. Yeah, for sure.
Alright,
All
you're at pick
right.
27.
Pick 27. They don't move anywhere. They got a good win against Nashville this week, but I just couldn't move them up. So yeah, Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I moved them up just because of how abysmal Vancouver's week was, and they won a game. That's basically it.
They won a game. Yeah.
Like, and honestly, the New York game was very close. Only losing by a goal. They were in it pretty much the whole way. But the Seattle one, they weren't in it at at all. So yeah, it's just been mediocrity really for a while now. So I understand the no movement.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I sort of thought back on what they've been doing, and I'm like, yeah, you can say Vancouver were bad, but Montreal have been pretty bad for a lot longer. Um, so yeah, that sort of weighed in on my decision there. But overall, if Vancouver keep going the way they're going, they could be below Anaheim
Yeah, yeah,
at this rate because they are bleeding goals almost worse than Anaheim at this point. So
yeah.
they've just got a bit more firepower.
It's a lesson to management. Get defensemen that defend. Then you don't need
Hmm.
as hard back checking forwards. Like, sure, you want back checking forwards, but when you have defenders that defend, they don't have to keep straining themselves. Simple. Um, uh, but yes. Anyway, on to my pick 25, a team moving down quite a fair bit, probably one of the most this week. It is the Ottawa Senators for me.
Yep. Yeah, I've got them there as well. Um, it was that loss, that 7-0 loss.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably wouldn't have been as hard. I mean, maybe. I don't think I was. I think they were before today. They were up a couple positions, but today just yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah, well, they get shut out 2 out of 3 games, and then their
Hmm.
only win is against Arizona. Um,
Yep.
and I think Colorado are slightly on the slide, and then they get destroyed by them. So that's why I've got them moving down so far. It's kind of disappointing because they've been playing good hockey throughout the season, but it
Mm.
just seems to sort of unravel at the moment.
Very inconsistent.
Mm,
That's the big one. That is the big one for them. Is that it's just so inconsistent. They can put it together for a few weeks, and then they just fall back.
yeah.
Um,
So I guess
so
you're just
yeah,
looking at the draft lottery at this point, trying to see. I'm not too sure if they can really make a run for it anymore, statistically. Like, I don't think they're in it.
I not with how strong the East is for them. I think they're going to want to prove that they're improving, they're getting better. But yeah, for me, their season's pretty much in the gutter with Montreal at this point.
Yay, Canadians for three Canadian teams all in the gutter. Poor
Yep.
guys. Um,
Gotta love it.
Alrighty, your pick.
All right, P24. I wanted to move these guys up further than I did. They've been playing some good hockey. I didn't want to move on them too quickly. Uh, so I settled with only moving them up 2 spots, and it's the Philadelphia Flyers.
I've done exactly the same thing. So 24, 2 spots, Philadelphia Flyers. Like you said, they've had a really good week. Feeding off Washington. Apparently, they've got it over Washington. And then they shut out Buffalo on a back-to-back, which is a big task, honestly, with how Buffalo played. Like I feel like Buffalo haven't been playing as great, but they're still a strong team. Um, yeah, I just can't. They've been so bad for so long. I can't just jump them up. I think that would be ridiculous, honestly. So two
Yeah,
spots
and
for now.
that's where I was at. And that was where I was at. And like you look at some of the teams they've beaten. I know they've won 7 of their last 8. But yep, they did feed off of Washington this week, which is still good wins. You got to give them that.
Yeah,
But before that, you've got Arizona, Anaheim, San Jose. They had those 4 wins on the West,
yeah.
which
Yeah, but look, some teams have like an up over others. Like even no matter where they are in the standings, like Arizona over Toronto. Last year
mhm.
last year it was like New Jersey over Boston. And even it doesn't matter where in the standings. It's just play style, how the coaches play the game, or just your team. So it's hard to read into the Washington Philadelphia game because it's just play style that just makes the win there, but doesn't make a win anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Because yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, if they keep winning, they're going to climb the ladder.
oh,
Because trust me,
definitely.
there's plenty of teams there to go in front of. But
Yeah, I
I
think
just couldn't
yeah,
move too quickly on them.
no, I agree wholeheartedly. So I guess onto a team that they could jump in the future. 23, I have a team moving up, but I don't know if it's deserved. It's Florida Panthers.
They don't move up for me, but they're in that exact same spot at 23.
Yeah, well, they go what two out of two this week. They lose to Dallas 5-1, beat Colorado 5-4, lose to Vegas 4-2, and then win against the Vancouver Canucks 4-3. So
Yeah.
they're basically winning the games, like competing in the games they should, and then just losing the games that they're expected to lose. So they're kind of just sitting where they should, honestly. There's no big surprises there for this week.
I mean, if we're talking about um, the Florida Panthers of last year, um, we'd be sitting here going, yeah, this is a really bad week. They've lost against 2 top 10 teams that they should probably be competing against better. But from what we've seen this year, their week was mediocre. They beat the teams that they probably should beat. A week in Colorado helps, but then pretty much just get beaten by Vegas and Dallas. I don't really think that Florida are going to be able to turn this around at this point. I
Nah,
think
I think it's almost done as well.
they're at 500 at 44 games. Don't get me wrong, they can do it, but they're 11 points out of third in the Atlantic, and they are, what are we? They're 5 points out of a playoff spot. So they're not done, but
I think
I
they're
also
done.
think it's going to be very hard.
I think they're done purely because I said a few weeks ago, and I still believe it, that the biggest change they had to make was coaching change.
Mhm.
I haven't seen anything. I don't even know if they're looking at doing it. Um, and that's where I think they're done. Is they're not even fixing the one thing that they could fix right now and get it over and done with. Um, that's why I feel like they'll stay 20 or below, honestly, until that change is made.
Yeah, it's quite sad to be honest, because you think of that team that and literally like finished first in the regular season,
Mm.
and yeah, you just everyone's hopes for these guys this year would have been, well, not everyone's hopes, but everyone's thoughts on where they would be as a pass mark would have been conference final at worst.
Yeah,
And now we're talking about them not even making playoffs. So
yeah,
it is one hell of a fall off. And yeah, if you're a Florida fan, I really feel bad for you because this should be your time to go for a cup, and you're potentially not even going to be watching Stanley Cup
yeah. Well,
playoff hockey.
they lost a really good coach. Look where New Jersey are to where they were last year, and look where Florida are to where they are last year. I feel like it's honestly just down to him. And if I was a team that needed a coach like Florida or someone else, I'd be ringing him, give him whatever he wants at this point. Um,
Just throwing the money.
yeah, just throw him the
That's
money.
fair. All right. Moving on to P22. Got a team moving up a couple of positions this week. St. Louis Blues.
Alrighty, it's where I've got St. Louis as well.
Yeah,
And
they're showing some glimpses. And I say glimpses because whenever I see some good stuff out of them, they lose. So they're still very inconsistent. Or how
mm.
would you put that? Because they're consistent at being inconsistent. So
Well, like
it's
yeah,
a tough one.
I feel like they did good for the week they had. Like they had a pretty hard week with the
Yeah.
Wild, Calgary twice, and then Tampa. So getting 2 wins out of that is pretty good, honestly. It is interesting that they get OT win against Calgary, then they lose 4-1. Um, don't
Two
know what.
days later.
Yeah, don't know what that's about. I feel like they should be competing harder there, but that probably sums up St. Louis in general. And they shut out the Wild. Like they shut out Wild of all things, and then they go and lose to Calgary 4-1. So it's topsy turvy. They've got a lot to fix as well. A lot of things to do before the trade deadline, honestly. And yeah, it's definitely another interesting team. But 2 out of 2, it's probably a good week for St. Louis in that respect.
Yeah. The tough one for me for these guys is you're 6 points out of a wild card spot. You have a game in hand. So you win that, you're 4 points out. And we know how weak the West is. You've got Ryan O'Reilly and Tarasenko. Do you make that call?
Well, I think
Personally, I don't.
Ryan O'Reilly should be on the out. I would 100%. Especially to a team like Columbus. I know I think he's a UFA, from memory,
So it'd have to be a sign.
but it would have to be a sign. But to a team like Columbus that need a center, and Tarasenko, I don't think he's had a great season that compared to his last season. So I don't think his value is as high as it used to be. But I think he's still somewhat going to make that call because I don't think they look anything like a Stanley Cup contending team at all. So I
I mean,
feel
they're
like,
both on the injured reserve right now, so that's exactly not what St. Louis wants.
yeah, and
But I think you've got to trade them. You cannot afford to lose these two for free. If I was Columbus, I would be waiting for the free agency. Um,
I
I'd
don't I
be
don't think
letting
Columbus
him
can
go to a
poach anyone in
contender.
free agency though. That's my problem. I don't think anybody Columbus will be able to poach anyone in free agency. I know they do a good job, but yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you on that. But if they were going to get him, the only way they're getting him and getting him to sign is through free agency.
yeah.
Um,
Alrighty, on
all right.
to pick number 21. I have Detroit Red Wings moving up one position.
Oh, love it. We are. We're on song here. I think we've only had one team. Oh no, yeah, two teams flipped
That's pretty
so
good.
far. So
And
yeah,
honestly, it's
so,
very debatable. Like, you just flip a coin. But they had a good week.
exactly.
They 7-5 win over the Jets, 4-1 win over the Toronto. Two really big wins. The downer is they lose 4-3 against Columbus, and that's the game that they should win. So they
Yep.
win the games they shouldn't, lose the games they shouldn't. So
Welcome to Detroit.
Yeah, it's a rough time for Detroit. I still have issues with how many
Yeah.
goals they concede. Somehow they only concede one against Toronto, but five against Jets, and then four against Columbus. It's still very high. And once again, that's just Detroit. But I couldn't do even though with those two big wins, it moved them up any higher.
No, I don't. That loss against Columbus definitely hurts. Like you look at it and go, "This is a really good week. You've beaten Toronto, you've beaten Winnipeg, and then you lose to a team that you should probably be beating 4-1,
Yep.
like you did against Toronto. Like if they go 7-5 against Winnipeg, they beat they lose just to Toronto and they beat Columbus 4-1. You probably hold their week better than what you do when they beat those two tough teams and lose to Columbus. Because it's just like, how do you go and lose to Columbus after winning those two games? That game against Columbus is a game that you should be winning if you're going to be contending for playoffs. And I'm honestly with this Detroit team, and I know this sucks if you're a Detroit fan. I've got a mate who's a Detroit fan, but I I honestly don't think I think your season's done,
I think it's
and it's
pretty
sad to
much
say.
pretty much done to an extent because Buffalo's been Buffalo, which kind of takes their spot, if anything, for a wild card run, just because of how strong the Metro's been. So yeah, I stand by you on that.
Yeah, I just can't see them getting past anyone. At this point in the East, I think it's a 10-horse race, and that's from Buffalo up. So those that are in the wild card spot now, and then Pittsburgh and Buffalo, and I think everyone else is pretty much kaput. But we could be wrong.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good call to make just over halfway through the season.
yeah. All right, moving on to P20. At 20, we've got moving down a position, but they didn't have a great week in terms of results, but they actually played some pretty good hockey. So it was tough to move them down, but I felt like they had to go down one spot because they didn't get those results. It's the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, I've got them just moving down one spot as well. I couldn't see them moving any further, and like they've like I've said, they had a one out of win one game out of four this week, but I don't feel like their losses were two big losses. Like they lose by a goal for three of the games that they lose,
Mm-hmm.
and they're competing in like they're in it the whole entire game. So yeah, actually I think they lost by two against Buffalo, but yeah, they're in it on their losses, so that's why I couldn't move them down any further.
Yeah, and that was a tough one. Like and you could even say they outplayed a couple of teams there, and it's just it becomes one of those things where the game against Buffalo today they concede a shorthanded goal when they're 3-all. They're on a power play. They're looking to establish a lead and get it done, and then they concede that goal, and it's game over. And it sort of looked to like take some of the wind out of their sails. Um, and it was just really disappointing because up to that point, it looked like Nashville were playing a really good game. Um, so yeah, I don't think they've had a bad week, but when you only take 2 out of 8 points, it's like, oh, doesn't look great.
Yep.
But I've still got some high hopes for them. I still think that with the way the West is, they could definitely pinch one of those wild card spots.
Alrighty, on to P19. A team for me moving down three positions. I have the Colorado Avalanche, just on a bad week. I feel like I had to be punished.
Yes. Nah, I've only got them up one more spot, but apart from that 7-0 win, they haven't been good.
No, they lose 5-4 to Florida, then they lose 3-2 to Chicago. I'm sure it's by a goal, but I feel like those are the those teams, I feel like they should be beating by 2 goals.
Mhm.
And then they go and destroy Ottawa because they just hate Canadian teams or something. But yeah, I would have liked to seen at least 3 out of 6 points this week, but yeah, it's just not good enough. I don't think they're playing as great as they were even without their star players. So that's why I pushed them down 3.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. They've only won 2 out of the last 9. Um, they're injury plagued. Yep, we get that. But again, I still think they're talented enough to get the win against Chicago. They didn't, so that they're slowly falling. I still think they're talented enough to, once they get their team back and everything going, they'll go on a run and they'll make the playoffs and they'll compete again. But it's got to happen sooner rather than later because the longer you leave it, the further that lead gets away from them and the harder it will be to come back. So
Yeah,
definitely going to be interesting.
no, I agree. Alrighty, your
At,
P19.
at P19, I've got another team that I'm a bit concerned about with the way they're playing and whether or not, if they don't turn it around, they'll be close enough to sort of pull it back, and that's New York Islanders.
Yeah, so we just switched them around. I got them at 18. Alrighty. I guess I can
Yes.
speak on it. They win 1 out of 3 games this week. Uh, they shootout loss to Dallas. So they draw against Dallas. They lose 3-1 against the Wild. Then they go and beat the Canadians 2-1. Um, but I just don't think they're looking good on ice. Uh, and that's what questions me about Dallas in a sense is the draw in a sense. Um, but yeah, I just don't think they're looking great on ice, and that's my big concern with them. They get 3 out of the 6 points, but yeah, they moved down 1 for me, and they're looking like they're falling out of that race for the playoffs for me.
Yeah, it's definitely looking rough for them. The tough part with the Islanders is that they're not a team to get destroyed. Like they won't. You're not going to see them get smacked 7-1. Um, but they'll lose a lot of games close. But it's because I just don't feel like they've got that firepower, and that's the biggest problem I feel with them. They've got a decent enough defensive core. They've obviously got a pretty good goaltender in Sorokin, but that's only going to take you so far because if your team can't put the puck in the back of the net, you're not going to win these games. And that's the struggle that I'm seeing with them is they can't, even in some of the defensive games where they hold the other teams to 2 goals, they can't score 3.
Yep.
They can't get those goals. They're only scoring 1 goal, 1 goal, 1 goal, 1 goal. Like you look at the amount of times they've scored 1 goal in the last 2 weeks. It four games, 1 goal. That's all they could manage. They score 2 against Edmonton, 2 against Montreal, and apart from Vancouver where they scored 6 goals, that's it. That's the best that they've done. 1-1-1-2, 1-1-1-2, and
Yeah.
you're just not going to get the wins if you aren't scoring more than 1 or 2 goals. It's just you're making your own life hard. I mean, how difficult is it to win 1-0?
Yeah, I think
Pretty
they're I
difficult.
think they're a team that's played more on structure and not on the type of players they have. Probably complete opposite to Edmonton in a sense, but it's like they don't have the stars, but they play an amazing good structure for the team, and then that's why they're struggling with those goals. But that's why they don't concede many goals. Um, so yeah, I think they're just a good 1 or 2 players away from it. Maybe they're a team that goes for Timo Meyer. Who knows? But um, yeah, they definitely need it. Some sort of playmaker or just shooter, just some
They
sort.
need someone to spark
Yep.
spark their scoring, I think, and yeah, they're in the playoffs at the moment, so why wouldn't you? And I think their window is slowly closing.
Yeah,
So
with the moves
if
they've
I
made,
was
it's
them,
closing.
yeah, if I was them, I'd 100% be going after a goal scorer
Yep.
because they need
Or
it.
Alrighty, on to P17, a team moving up, I believe, 3 positions. I've got the Edmonton Oilers just outside the top 16. I couldn't move.
That's where I've got them.
Yeah, I couldn't make the move to put them in there. They lose to LA. They beat Anaheim, beat San Jose, and then the good game on a back-to-back. They beat Vegas, but they're in the Pacific and they're farming Anaheim and Sharks because they get that benefit, and then they lose to LA, and then but they beat Vegas. So that's why they move up for me so much. 3 positions this week is they beat Vegas on a back-to-back, which I thought was a really good effort. Um, but yeah, I still have my gripes with them. I think it's kind of like LA and whatnot and Vegas. Like those teams are just their points because they get the feed off the West a bit more. They're a bit more inflated compared to other teams.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they had a good week if you look at it and go, they've won their last three, but you look at it and go, Anaheim and San Jose, if you didn't win those, you're probably getting demoted. Like
Mm.
they're the games where you go, okay, so a win gives you zero. Anything less than that gives you negatives. And yeah, the Vegas game was good and it was a great win on a back to back as well, all the rest of that. But they're still 4-3-1 over their last eight. So yeah, I've moved them up three as well, but I definitely need to see a lot more from them. And they're coming up against some tough opponents, Seattle and Tampa Bay this week. So I'm interested to see how they go.
Yeah, I think it's a really good testing week next week for them. All right, I guess we can move on to the top
Sure.
16 with your pick.
All right, top 16. Team that's slowly, I think they've been silent achievers, these guys. They just keep moving up and up and up in the rankings. And not just the NHL standings, but the power rankings as well. I got the Calgary Flames.
Oh, okay. I've got them at P15. Just moving up 3 spots, so a little bit more
Yeah.
than you. But yeah,
Yeah,
like
I
you said,
definitely
they're
could have
achieving.
put them at 15.
Mm.
I,
Yeah,
I considered them at 15.
I think these positions you could flip a coin and put them ever, and it's valid. Like they're just that close. But they had a pretty decent week. They get what 6 out of 8 points. My big question was the OT loss against Chicago. That was my big gripe. With their week, but the rest of the week was really solid, and I think they're slowly on the up. Probably a team that's going under the radar with some people, I'd say, with how they're just slowly getting a little bit better. But yeah, that the Chicago one held me back a little bit this week.
Yeah, yeah, it worried me as well. They were 3-1 down. They did well to come back and take it to OT. But it does hold some questions. But at the same time, they beat Dallas 6-5. Um, and not to mention they were 6-1 up against Dallas. They almost blew it, which would have raised some serious alarms. But to be 6-1 up against a team like Dallas, you've got to be doing something right. So yeah, they're looking a lot better at the moment. And yeah, if you're talking about the Kachuk Huberdeau trade, I think Calgary would be liking their position a lot more than Florida at this point.
Yep. No. Well, I think they're one of the strongest Canadian teams. Just having a look. What has it got? One, two, three, um, four. So what? Probably fifth best.
Probably besides
Um,
Toronto,
yep. That's pretty much it. So yeah,
Toronto
one
or
of the
Winnipeg. Yeah.
Toronto or Winnipeg above them. So yeah, third best. It's probably really good for them. I think they're pushing for those playoffs, and I think they're going to get better. I think they have the squad and the coaching and whatnot, and they can get the structure behind it. So I think honestly, if you're a Calgary fan, you should be on the up, and hopes are up.
For
Alrighty.
sure.
So my pick, P16. Just moving down one. I have the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, I was torn with this one. so I left them where they were last week. But yeah, it's a tough one. They
Yeah,
started off well, and
I
they finished really bad.
yeah they win 2 out of 4, but the two teams they beat, Arizona and Vancouver, and then the two teams they lose to, Winnipeg and Carolina. So the four teams, two of them on completely opposite spectrum to the other two, where they are in the leaderboard in our power rankings. It's yeah, so it's kind of like they got what they expected, and I know they brought it to Carolina on a back to back, but they got destroyed by Winnipeg, and that's where I've got to put Calgary over them this week.
Yeah, no, I did. They played really well against Carolina today, but that Winnipeg game was not one of their best moments. They just they did not look good. Um, and I think Winnipeg had two goals disallowed as well. Uh, so it could have been a lot worse for them. Um, but yeah, it's tough. I think Pittsburgh 1 minute we're thinking that they're a Stanley Cup contender, and then the next minute we're wondering if they're going to even make the playoffs. So it's a bit of Jekyll and Hyde with them at the moment.
Yeah, if they make the playoffs, they probably like get through the first round, like in a game of 7, and then just get swept in the second round. With the way their season's going.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. They'll sweep the first round, and then they'll get swept in the second. That's what's going to happen to them. But all right. So P14, a team that's fallen off after having a really good run, but I don't think it's as bad as what the results sort of showed. Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, that's my P14. I think you're a bit higher on them than I was last week. They moved down 2 positions for you. Um,
Yeah,
but
I had a tough
yeah,
week. A tough week.
yeah.
See, coming up against Seattle and Winnipeg.
What was hard for me is they get shut out by Philadelphia. They go on a back to back and then take it to the Kraken, probably outplay them honestly, and then they lose to the Jets, but then they go and beat Nashville. So it was a flip flop week, but the big question for me was the Philadelphia shutout. But I understand
Yeah.
Philadelphia have been playing better, but I feel like Buffalo, honestly, the way they've been playing, should be winning that.
Oh, I think they will look back on that and look at it as a missed opportunity. But those things happen from time to time. I think that the thing that would be really sort of hurting them is they outplayed Seattle and lose 4-3. They don't even
Yeah,
take it to OT.
exactly.
And then they take it right to the Jets too and probably outplayed them in a sense. Um, and then they lose it in the third, so, it was 2-2 going into, midway through the third, and then Winnipeg, I think, scores a goal and then scores an empty net goal. So they were in the games besides that Philly one. But if they win that Philly one and then they're in those other two games, you kind of look at it as, okay, this is good. We're competing against the best and we're getting the wins that we should. But they lose to Philly and then they lose those two, even though they probably should have and could have won. So it just makes their week seem a lot worse than what it was. But I
Yeah,
still have high hopes for them. I still think they're playing some really good hockey. Um, they've just got to really start getting those results because it's getting tougher and tougher.
yep, I agree. Alrighty, on to P number 13. I have a team that's just moving down a couple. It's the Washington Capitals. And just speaking on their week, they go, they win 1 out of 3. I can see that you have them also at P13. It looks like we did the exact same thing with them. Um, yeah, they go 1-0, and it was kind of disappointing game, honestly, against the Blue Jackets. So I feel like they probably should have lost that game. And then they lose to Philly, then lose to Philly because Philadelphia just have their number for some reason. And so it's hard to make something of that week. But I feel like it's not an impressive week.
No, it was a very underwhelming week. I mean, speaking of that game against Columbus, yeah, they 38 shots to 19. Um, a bloke that didn't have a goal to his name
Yeah.
3 weeks ago and now has seven. Um, it just insane is the one who scores early and that's what wins it for them. But yeah, I don't know. Like we were talking about these guys potentially going for a top being a top 10 consistent team and potentially pushing for that top 5 spot if they kept their performances up. And they've just sort of fallen off the face of the earth.
Mm.
They've lost 4 out of the last 6. Their only wins have come against Columbus. And when you look at the teams they've played, Buffalo, Nashville, and Philly, those games that they've lost, they probably shouldn't be losing those games.
No,
Like,
they shouldn't. Honestly,
or at least
they
picking
shouldn't
up
be even close.
50% of
Honestly.
them. Exactly. They should be picking up at least 50% of those games, and they didn't. But
Yeah. So I think they might be on a slight slide, seeming with what I saw with the Columbus game, but and then Philly having their number. Um, but I'll have to see what happens with outside division rivals because I know division rivals can sometimes just edge games when they shouldn't.
yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
alrighty, your pick.
All right. Going on to P12. I feel like I've got these guys too low, but when I try to put them ahead of who I've got ahead of them, I just don't know who to put them in front of. And it's the LA Kings.
Yeah, that's where
But
I've
they've
got
been
them as well.
playing well. They've been playing some really good hockey. Um, they played all right for probably half of the game today against New Jersey. They probably had New Jersey's number in the first, but then sort of just fell away as the game went on, fell away in that second. Um, but still, a lot to be excited about. I still don't really like their gameplay. Um, but as I've said previously, that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about gameplay if they're getting results.
Yeah, well,
Results are all that matters, really.
yeah, and they get some big results in regards to beating Edmonton, a division rival. So that's the big win for the week and the big game for them. And I think they've been a pretty solid, just outside the top 10 team this season. It's just they're just going to maintain it. I think they will. I think they'll make playoffs. I don't know what they do in the playoffs, but it's kind of it's kind of a weird team in the sense that they don't play the prettiest hockey, but they get results. But then when they do play pretty hockey, sometimes they don't get the results. So it's a fascinating team.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and yeah, and I also think they've got a bit of grunt and grit about them, which is suited for playoff hockey.
Hmm.
Um, and they're getting some good goaltending from I don't know, Copley. Um, so they could pull it together because if they don't make the playoffs, that's going to be pretty embarrassing from here in what is a very weak um conference. But yeah, I think they'll make playoffs. The question will be what can they do in playoffs, but I definitely think they've got the grit for playoffs. It's just going to be a question of can they pull it together enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to like what they're doing.
Alrighty. So P11 team just outside the top 10. I reckon the next few picks will be interesting. I reckon we'll be off on a few of them. But the team
Hmm.
I've got here is just outside top 10, Minnesota Wild, moving down 3 positions for me.
They move for me as well, but I'm a bit higher on Minnesota than you are. I've got them at 9.
Yeah, I just it's a shutout against St. Louis that really does it, and then they get a shootout loss or a draw against the Rangers. They defeat Islanders, then they defeat, and honestly a close game against Arizona, 2-1. So I don't rate their week greatly just because of that shutout loss to St. Louis. And that's why they moved down for me because I think some other teams just had a little bit better of weeks. And honestly, I could flip a dime for probably P11 all the way to something like a P7 or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's honestly interchangeable from next like 3, 4, 5 positions.
Yeah, that exactly. Like it's funny how we've probably got pretty much the same teams from 7 to 11. It's just they're going to be varied, um, based on, I guess, what we think each team's doing. But Minnesota probably disappointed in that 3-0 loss against St. Louis. Um, because otherwise, if you have a look at it, if they win that game, they're 7 from 8.
Yeah,
And we're probably sitting here going, well, that's a great week. But yeah, it's disappointing to lose to a team like St. Louis and get shut out. I think that's the tough part. But I still rate Minnesota. I don't think mine was less on what they've done and more on what other teams around them have done and
yeah,
are doing. So yeah, for me, I had to have them in my top 10
yeah. No, you've been higher on them over the last few weeks. I still think they're playing good hockey. I think the top 12 is a pretty strong top 12. Um, so
for
them
sure.
them moving down three is not really a big call on them.
No. But here's one of the teams that I'm kind of interested to know where you've got them because you've always had them a lot higher than me. This wasn't really off the back of what they were doing, more on the back of what other teams around them are doing. Um, and they move out of the top 10 probably the first time for me. It's the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, it's a big call. I've got them in my top 10, obviously at P9. So I did have them at 8 for a bit, but then I did decide just to move them down one more. Um, moved down 3 for me. They moved down 2 for you, so it's a bigger drop for me. But it's still like they had a meh week. Like when you play 2 games for the week, it's hard to get a gauge. They beat Florida, then they lose to Edmonton, but they lose by 1 goal. Um, yeah, it's kind of like a not much happened week, but because the other teams played more and did other things around it, I think that's why they moved down.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. That was my thought process on it. I had a couple of teams. The teams I had in front of them last week didn't do enough for them to move above them. Um, and then I had a couple of teams that just had to move ahead of them with what they were doing. So yeah, it's tough. And yep, I know a lot of people will probably be like they're fourth in the rankings or whatever. How do you have them so low? But um, I'm still not sold on Vegas. I've still got my concerns about them. The goaltending is one of them. I don't know if Logan Thompson can do it for the full year. Um, so yeah, just for me, I'm not as high on them as some are.
Yeah, not understandable. Alrighty. I believe it's my pick. Onto team in P10. I have the New York Rangers that do not move for me.
Yeah, see, this is a team that I actually really enjoy watching. Um, Tough to say as a Devils fan, but I do actually quite enjoy watching them. And I do rate them quite highly. So I've got them up a little bit more, P8.
Yeah, I just couldn't move them just because like sure they get the 4 points for the week, but it was a shootout win and then an OT win. Sure, it was against hard teams in Wild and Dallas, but the Dallas one was honestly pretty lucky. I would say we're scoring with like one less than
Pretty
1 second.
lucky.
Yeah,
They
that,
broke a record, 0.9 seconds.
yeah. So yeah, then they get the OT win, obviously. So I think that it's a little bit inflated, but it's definitely good that they're at least drawing against these high-ranking teams, and that's obviously why they're in the top 10. But I just don't rate their week that great, and that's why they don't move for me.
Yeah, I think I look at their last 6 games and I look at the teams they've played and I know Florida aren't as good this year, but beaten Florida, beaten Carolina, beaten Minnesota. Yep. Okay, it was in shootout. beaten Dallas, um, and then lost to New Jersey in overtime. So that they've had a really tough week. They've played probably all the other teams around them in the top 10, um, and they've won most of them. And the
Uh,
other
yeah.
one they lost, they at least took a point from. So
I'd say
yeah,
they're
I'm
drawing
just
most of
liking
them,
what
but
I'm
that's where
seeing
I'm
from
at.
them.
That's where I'm at. I'd say they're drawing most of them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, true.
alrighty, your pick at 10.
All right, at 10, I have um, just moving down a few spots. Again, not really off the back of what they're doing, more on the back of what teams in front of them are doing. I got the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, I understand that. I got them at 8. I debated to go, 9, 10, even 11th. Um, it's just they've been the more consistent team throughout the season. For me, compared to all the others, and that's what really holds water for me. Um, and it's like you look at their week, they beat Florida 5-1, shootout win against New York Islanders. So a draw against the Islanders, they draw against Rangers but lose no T, and then they lose by a goal against Calgary. So they're in every game, or they destroy the team in regards to Florida, and that's what I like. It's very consistent hockey, and I
Yeah.
think that's why they just going to stay around that little mark of just around the 10 mark for you and
Yeah,
8 for me.
I think that's why I couldn't take them out of the top 10. Yeah, I still rate them quite highly. Mm. They might go out of the top 10 depending on what happens next week. They got a few teams like Vegas and LA Kings coming up, but yeah, for now, I still think they're a top 10 side for sure.
Hmm. Alrighty, P7 for me. I have team moving up quite a bit. It's the Seattle Kraken.
And it's kind of hard not to bump them up, isn't it?
Oh,
They
you're a bit lower on them last week, were you? +7.
yeah, I had them at 14, but yeah, you can't knock what they're doing, especially when you look at the teams that they've beaten. That was my big thing. I didn't want to move on them too quickly because the previous month they won 3 out of 11 games, or something along those lines. But you look at the teams they're beating, and they beat the New York Islanders, Edmonton, Toronto, Boston, and Buffalo. Even Buffalo, I'll throw Buffalo in there because the way they've been playing. That's five reasonably good teams,
Yeah. Yeah, so what the
and they're
first
not
first
just
first team that beat
winning.
Boston in regulation
Exactly, and
at home. Yeah.
Boston's home rink. But they're not just beating these teams; they're walloping them. Like they Toronto 5-1, Islanders 4-1, Ottawa 8-4, Montreal 4-0, Boston 3-0, and then we all know what they did to Chicago today: 5 goals from 6 shots. Like it was insane. Um,
Yeah, I think they're really high in the standings as well. I think they've had a pretty somewhat up and down season, but they've been playing somewhat really good hockey, and that's what I like. They're playing really hard hockey to play against, kind of like you play our style no matter what type of hockey. And then if they don't play their style, they end up with like an 8-5 game or a 9-8 game. But yeah,
yeah, I'm still very concerned about their goaltending, but yeah, look, you've definitely got to be liking what you're seeing from them at the moment. It's a lot better than what they were last year and where anyone could have expected them to be this year.
yeah,
All right. Number 6, coming in, I've got the Winnipeg Jets.
yeah. That's where I've got the Jets as well. Just moving up 3 positions for me, 2 for you. They're just looking good. I think they win 3 out of 4. Uh, 7-4 against Vancouver. They The concerning game was the Detroit Red Wings game, losing 7-5. But then they go and beat Buffalo and Pittsburgh on the back-to-back. And I feel like they're outplaying most teams, honestly. But the concerning one for me was the Detroit game. Just
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. they lose to a empty net goal in that game basically, but
Yeah,
you conceding 7 goals is still you do start to question because we've questioned it before. How much can Hellebuck take? Because at the end of the day, he's a big reason why they hold so strong on that back end. So um, you don't like to see it when they just bleed goals like that. But
mm,
one of the good things is they've got an offense to pull it back when they do bleed goals. So yeah, I mean, it's still looking pretty good for them. They're right up there in the standings, and you've
yeah,
got to sort of take them as a contender.
yeah. They've been one of the more consistent teams, along with Dallas, and they're always in the top 10, somewhere.
Hmm.
And yeah, they remain there. Alrighty,
For sure.
P5. I have a team moving down. A couple actually. It's the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I just I couldn't have them stay at 3. I definitely couldn't have them move up. I don't think they earn to be above the teams that have jumped them. And like they beat Philly, they beat Nashville, but then they lose to Detroit on a back to back, and then they lose 4-3 against Boston. But I don't feel like they were playing that great. Um, and I feel like they're slightly on a slide. So that's my concern with them. I don't think it's a horrible week they've had, but I feel like they're slowly sliding.
Yeah, they definitely seem like it. Um, since they lost that game to Arizona, they've been on a bit of a slide downward trajectory. But um, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen enough from them because you know you're looking at it and you're going, well, they haven't had a tough draw. Um, Probably for the last 12 games, they've played one team in the top 16, or two teams. Sorry, they played Seattle as well. So 2 out of their 12 games have been against actual top teams, and they've lost 5 of those 12. So
Mm.
it does start to sort of put that doubt um,
Yeah,
in your
it, it
mind.
it is interesting that they get the defenders back and then they kind of start playing iffy. But I don't think they're playing horrible. It's just a little bit more iffy than what it was. Um, but yeah, they're still P5.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I still think they're a reasonably good team, but yeah, you do start to get some concerns when their goaltending goes to shit, like it has.
Yep.
All right, moving on to P4. Um, I've got a team that have moved up a couple of spots. I think they had a bit of a slump. Weren't playing bad hockey, just weren't getting the results, and now the results are going their way, and they dismantled a couple of teams pretty well this week. So got the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, it's where I've got them too. Just moving up one for me. But P4, but like you said, I don't think they've been playing really a bad game all year. Uh, it's just getting the results, and sometimes they're their worst enemy. But I think the Carolina game for me was the big one this week, and then the LA game was a big one as well, just because of it was on a back to back. But I think it was a little bit easier of a back to back because they versed Anaheim, and they were pretty much had that game in the bag, pretty much first period onwards. At the end of the first period, so they could rotate the four lines and stuff and don't have to tire out their stars. So it's a little bit easier of a back to back, but it's still a back to back.
Yeah, I mean, look, 13 points from their last 8 games. They've gone 6-1-1,
Mm.
and yeah, they're getting results.
And I,
And they're getting results against good teams. That's the
yeah,
other thing, you know. Um, they beat Pittsburgh. They lose to Carolina in shootout. Uh, and they beat the Rangers in Carolina. Um, two good teams, and they beat the Kings today, who we've been talking about how the Kings are slowly coming, and deserve more respect, all the rest of that sort of stuff. Well, the Devils beat those guys today as well. So yeah, I feel like they're getting their season back on track, and yeah, with some of the teams they've got to come, um, they could definitely cement their playoff spot in the coming weeks.
Mm, no, for sure. They've been looking good. But I guess now it's moving on to the top three team, just moving up one position. I've got the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be too much difference in our final three, to be honest.
Yep.
I've got Tampa there as well.
Yeah, they also win all three games this week, beating Columbus, Vancouver, and St. Louis. So a bit of an easier week, but it's still a good week. And I just think they've been very consistent playing their game. I don't think they're outplaying their opponents like as drastically as some other teams, but they're always in it and they're always outplaying just that little bit, I think. And it's
I think
honestly,
that's why they're so good,
yeah, it's
and
just
that's why
consistently
they
just a
get it.
little bit doing it. Yeah,
Yep. And that's the thing, like it's that experience that just, we've spoken about a couple other teams that have had easy-ish weeks, but they've dropped points. And it's like, but that's something Tampa just that they don't do very often. They get the job done against the teams that they should get the job done against.
mm,
Um, and yep, they'll occasionally lose those games and they'll drop points. Everyone does it, but they don't do it that often. They take full advantage of those lower teams when they get the chance because they know that they're the points that you should be locking up. Um, and yeah, I think they're just cruising again to another playoff berth where they're going to look to go on another run
yeah, a bit
and
insane, isn't
potentially
it?
make it a fourth. Oh, it's insane. If they make four Stanley Cups in a row, that's incredible.
Yeah, so it's a dynasty in itself of just making the cup.
Oh,
Um,
100%. All
all
right.
right, number two and
Um,
number one.
Number two for me, I don't think there's any surprise here. Didn't really see any enough from either of like the first or second teams to make any changes. So I got Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, I've got the same. Haven't moved on them. I'm not sure how long I've had them there. I think it's at least 3 weeks, but yeah, they're just still solid. Don't think it was like what 2 out of 3 wins this week. The one loss was to New Jersey, and then they beat the other division rivals in Columbus and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh in a kind of close game though. They really took it to them, but I still think they're just a really big powerhouse with what they've got. Brent Burns on the back line. Um, it's hard to fault them really, besides really just taking a lot of shots and not scoring as many goals as they should.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing. They did lose four in a row.
Mm,
Um, but I did have to feel for them a little bit because they weren't really the worst team in any of those games. But they lose four games. It's kind of similar to the Devils when they were struggling a little bit. They weren't. They were the better team in most of the games, if not all the games, but just couldn't get the results. But yeah, I still think Carolina are probably one of the, um, if not favorites to win the cup at the moment. Unless you're sort of talking about the team we're going to talk about next, and that's the Boston Bruins, who I think are the out favorites at this point. But um, I think other than Boston, I think Carolina or obviously Tampa would probably be your two closest to competing to with Boston for that Stanley Cup.
yeah, well, Boston lose their first game in regulation at home to Seattle and getting shut out at the same process, but then they win their other 2 games, beating Toronto and then obviously destroying the Ducks earlier in the week. Um, they've just been number one really, well, for pretty much most of the year, and it's honestly a pretty big trio right there. Honestly, probably to P4, P5, like that's a really strong top five. It's hard to even think that one of those teams won't make the cup playoffs. But I guess only two can make it, and
Well,
they're all
only one of
and
those.
they're all Eastern teams, which is the worst thing for them. Um,
You're only
So
going to see one of those five, if any of them, in the cup.
yeah, I think someone has to get this and show it to the schedulers of the playoffs and go, we need to remake this because these teams deserve to qualify. And yeah, no,
Well, yeah,
it's just brutal that you got to come up against these teams in the playoffs. But yeah, it's honestly Boston haven't made a step wrong. It's definitely probably one of their final years to make the run, especially with the Pasternak situation. But Pasternak does not want to stay. Um, and then yeah, on Carolina, just I think they're just both consistent teams. They've been easily the most consistent throughout the season, and then probably New Jersey, then Tampa in regards to consistency.
yeah, exactly. I think Toronto have been good, but they've probably benefited a lot of losing in OT, which Carolina's been, you know, has done a bit as well. But yeah, like if you're looking at in terms of games won, Devils are second in the league with 28 wins. Um, so yeah, it's questionable. The top five, the biggest questions I've probably got for putting the Devils and Toronto in that mix with Boston, Carolina, and Tampa is, can they do it come playoffs? Boston,
Oh yeah, I agree.
Carolina, Tampa Bay, all proven playoff teams. They've all won series. The Devils haven't been in a playoff since 2017, 2018, and haven't won a playoff series since 2012. And Toronto haven't won a playoff series since God knows when. Um, so, yeah, as much as I think that top five, you're right, is absolute powerhouse. I think for those two teams in the lower end of it, they've just got to prove that they can win a playoff series.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's our rankings. I guess you can compare and make a note down below in the comments section on who you agree, disagree with. If we both got it wrong, both got it right, and just like, subscribe, leave a comment, and check out for any other videos that come up. Either way, tune in next week for another Power Rankings.
Yeah, take care, guys.
Cheers.